What rights to work, what avenues of expression does the working class in China have in the present day? Many people think that the Chinese state is a monstrous dictatorship and that there's no democratic rights at all in China, and that the Communist Party is completely corrupt, it's full of careerists, and really the working class has no avenues to express itself politically in any of the official state structures. Is that true?
To generalize about this question as from a few reports from a few journalists who nearly all live in Beijing or Shanghai, a couple of big cities. You go outside the most famous big cities, you barely see a foreigner. And therefore the Western analysts, unless you have a few researchers, Western analysts have almost no idea what's happening in these places. And the consequence of that is that they will generalize from a few examples that they've got from their own experience, and perhaps from, journalists are generally quite lazy. They like to pick up material from somewhere else if possible, rather than making the effort themselves. And they're influenced by the environment that they're in, the circumstances they're in. We know this, for example, about Venezuela. Venezuela is very much a distorted viewpoint you get from Western bourgeois analysts. Added to that is that most of the Chinese journalists, at least those who have any influence in the big cities, are pro-capitalist. And many of the elite in China are also pro-capitalist. And so that gives you an overwhelming, pervasive influence within the environment in which we will collect our data from and our information from. So to go beyond that and to go into depth beyond that, you really have to be able to at least analyze data from all around the country and collect that data and assess what it means. Now, is China a democratic state? No, of course it's not. It's not a democratic state, nor were any of the Stalinist states. It's the characteristic of Stalinism, actually, that you don't have democracy, because Stalinism is a system whereby a bureaucracy rules over a planned economy. Its privileges are illicitly gained privileges, and to conceal the source of those privileges, they require some form of dictatorial power, and therefore they are easily cheated. It's like, the difference between a private business person. If a private business person, Richard Branson, drives down the street in a Rolls Royce, people, go, right, Richard, But if the local, if the head of the local council drives around in a Rolls Royce, people turn around, where did you get that money from? Stole it from us. And it's the same type of conflictual mentality, because this is unearned, illicit acquisition. And therefore Stalinism, by its very nature, is an undemocratic regime. So the idea that you could judge whether China is a planned economy or not on the basis of whether or not they have democracy is, of course, a misnomer, because Stalinism in general is an undemocratic form of organization. Having said that, again, to return to the question of scale, the new working class in China in the last 30 years is 333 million strong. The old working class, another 120 odd million. In other words, you have a working class greater in scale than anywhere before in human history, in one single country. And that working class, and this is the point that Marx makes, isn't it? The working class is the force that brings about the new society, because it operates large-scale industry and therefore can take over the running of large-scale industry and establish socialism. And this class is the decisive force preventing the bureaucracy from re-establishing capitalism and compelling the bureaucracy to serve, to some degree, the interests of the masses at peril of death. And that really is what the balance of class forces means in China. It is that the working class has become the decisive force. The Chinese working class, I make no hesitation about stating it, has become the decisive force in the world revolution. It is the decisive force because it's the biggest, the most powerful working class in the history of mankind. And as a consequence of that, they've been able to extract some, merely by their numerical weight, been able to extract some parameters for operating. Not much, but some parameters. And one of those things is to utilize the existing legislation within the Chinese state, within the parameters of the bureaucratic apparatus, to take advantage of whatever legal rights there are. And it's quite logical, isn't it? If you're a worker and you're working in the factory and the bureaucratic state is a repressive state, then it's natural that you would seek to use legal channels. So you say to them, the law says this, and then of course the policeman will come and say, the boss of the factory has said, you've been causing trouble, and then you say and say, no, but the law says this, and the Communist Party says this, and Hu Jintao says this, and therefore you're facing the state apparatus with its own, if you like, contradictions. That on the one side there is a rising bourgeois and the threat of, if you like, by corrupt and criminal layers within the apparatus, and on the other side the state is officially still a proletarian state, a deformed workers' state. They call it socialism, but is officially still representing the workers, and the workers officially, by law in China, are the masters of the state. And actually, according to the enterprise law on workers' democracy, if it was implemented, would be pretty close to what Lenin proposed. But it's not implemented, of course.